Welcome back to Deep Dive. I'm your host. Today, we're really digging into the health landscape in Zimbabwe. It's incredibly complex, very dynamic. We've got a bunch of recent reports and notes here, and we're going to try and pull out the key insights for you, give you a snapshot, you know, both the successes and, well, the challenges that are still there. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, exactly. And our mission here isn't just to skim the surface. We want to look at some specific stories. Some might surprise you. Others are quite serious to give you a richer feel for what's going on. We'll touch on public health ideas, community reactions to problems, even how health organizations themselves are developing, really trying to understand the dynamics behind the news and, what it means more broadly.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is how varied the topics are today. You might think, okay, new condoms, cervical cancer, community protests, organizational rules, are these related? But as we get into it, you'll see they really do weave together. It paints a pretty full picture of what's happening, the pulse of health and society there. It's quite revealing. All right, so let's kick off with something maybe unexpected for public health news. New condom brands. And here's where it gets really interesting. Zimbabwe's got these two new brands, Trust and Lovers Plus Way. But listen to this. They're designed specifically for enhanced pleasure and to delay climax. Well, it's definitely a different angle on public health, right? It's got my eye straight away in the reports.
It's fascinating, isn't it? And if you look at the why behind it, it's not just marketing spin. These features, they're directly tied to public health goals. See, a big hurdle for condom use everywhere has always been, preference, how it feels. So by making products that address that directly, pleasure, delay the idea is to actually boost usage, make people want to use them more consistently. And that, in turn, helps cut down STIs like HIV and gives people more contraceptive choices they actually like. Groups like Population Solutions for Health, they get this. Product appeal matters for effectiveness. It's quite a user-focused approach.
Right, so it's market-driven thinking entering public health. That's a shift. But the sources also bring up a big challenge looming over this kind of thing. Funding, specifically declining donor funding. That's not just a budget issue, is it? It changes the whole game. So when you see these smart, tailored product launches, how does less money from donors affect those plans? How do these organizations keep these vital programs running, maybe even make them self-sufficient, when that traditional funding stream, shrinks?
That's exactly the tightrope they're walking. It forces them to be, creative. When donor money dries up, you can't just rely on handouts anymore. You have to shift towards sustainability. So they get innovative, not just with products, but with how they operate. Maybe partnering with local businesses or trying tiered pricing free for some, a small cost for others, or using more community volunteers. It's tough, definitely. But sometimes it leads to solutions that are more locally rooted, potentially more lasting. The aim is to build something that can stand on its own eventually, even if getting there is hard work. It's a real shift towards self-reliance.
That makes a lot of sense. A necessary evolution, perhaps. Okay, let's switch gears a bit, but stay with public health wins. There's some genuinely good news on cervical cancer, and what's fascinating here are the numbers. Really impressive. Cases dropped from over 3,000 down to 1,354 in 2024. That's a huge impact. Shows that targeted efforts can really work.
Absolutely. That drop is significant, and it's not accidental. Looking at the sources, it seems to come from a mix of things. Better HPV vaccination for young girls, for one. Also, improved screening, like using VIA, that visual inspection method. It's simpler, cheaper. Plus, training more community health workers to do basic checks and raise awareness, especially out in the regions. The government and NGOs have pushed for better screening, even mobile clinics. It's that proactive, preventative work paying off. Catching things early saves lives.
A major step forward, no doubt. But here's the thing that stands out to you when you hear this. Despite the overall good news, there are still big challenges, right? Contrasting realities. Harare, the capital, still has a really high burden of cervical cancer. And then there's the ongoing need, the critical need for more screening out in the rural areas. So progress, yes, but it's not reaching everyone equally yet. The details matter.
Precisely. It shows how complex these health issues are. The high rate in Harare could be, a few things. Maybe just more people concentrated there. Or maybe urban factors mean people need help later. Or maybe even within the city, access isn't as easy as you'd think. Cost, transport, just knowing where to go. And for rural areas, it's the classic problems. Distance, maybe lack of awareness, stigma sometimes, not enough trained staff or equipment. That's why the Cancer Association of Zimbabwe keeps stressing awareness and early screening. They're not just words, they're key. It shows you need both people taking charge of their health through education and the system providing the means. Both have to work together to make sure that national progress actually reaches every single person.
Okay, now let's pivot to something quite different, but just as important. A story about community action. It's a tough one. There was this huge outpouring of outrage at Resende bus rank. It followed the horrific rape of a young grade 7 girl there.
Hmm.
The reports really convey the raw anger, the grief, and just this massive call for justice from everyone. It's powerful.
It really raises that question. How do communities react when they're most vulnerable or harmed? And what stood out was how quickly groups like the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe responded. Very vocal. They weren't just expressing anger, they were demanding immediate action. Justice for the victim, accountability, but also pushing for bigger changes, stricter rules for those transport touts. You know, the informal guys selling tickets or directing buses at places like Resende rank. In unregulated spots, they can sometimes contribute to, well, an unsafe feeling. So the coalition wants rules, licensing maybe, to make these public spaces safer, especially for women and kids. It's about systemic change after such a terrible event.
Yeah, it connects right back to that idea of community vigilance, doesn't it? This awful incident. It's not just about one case. It highlights this urgent need for systemic fixes. Not just punishing perpetrators after the fact, but actually preventing things like this through clear rules, enforcement, just creating a safer environment overall. What kind of specific regulations are they actually asking for? How would that change things day to day for people using buses?
Right. It's a multi-layered approach they're advocating for. Things like maybe making the roles at bus ranks official, licensing, uniforms so people are identifiable, accountable. Also calls for more police presence and easy, trusted ways for people to report problems. Even looking at the physical design of the bus ranks better lighting, fewer hidden spots. The aim is really to dismantle that informal, sometimes chaotic setup that can allow abuse and replace it with something regulated, transparent. For someone using the bus, hopefully it would mean feeling safer, less risk of harassment, and knowing there's somewhere to turn if things go wrong. It turns tragedy into a push for real reform.
That's a very clear example of community pressure driving change. And that brings us nicely to another side of community and organizational health, the foundations. Internal strength. We saw this mentioned with the ZNNP Plus meeting in Guero. They had this extraordinary general meeting, and apparently they unanimously adopted a new constitution. Now, that might sound a bit dry, a bit procedural, but for an organization like this, it's actually a really big deal for how they function.
Oh, absolutely. Those foundational bits, they seem technical, but they're vital. And just to clarify, ZNNP Plus is the Zimbabwe National Network of People Living with HIV, a really important group. Now, the sources mentioned that delays in getting this constitution sorted had been causing uncertainty, and that uncertainty can mean trouble. Maybe internal squabbles, questions about leadership, problems making decisions. Even donors might get nervous. When an organization serving a vulnerable group is shaky internally, that affects their work, right? So this unanimous adoption, what does that actually signal for ZNNP Plus going forward? And for you listening, what does it tell you when any group, especially one doing vital work, gets its own house in order?
That's a great point about uncertainty's impact. If the rules aren't clear, things can grind to a halt. So for ZNNP Plus RUC, what does adopting this new constitution really mean for the people they serve? How does that internal step translate into real-world benefits for people living with HIV in Zimbabwe?
So what does it all mean? Well, getting that governance sorted, adopting the Constitution, it's huge for an organization like ZNNP Plus 8. So it's way more than just paperwork. It provides, first off, clarity. Everyone knows the mission, the goals, it gives direction, clear roles, how decisions get made. It stops confusion, builds trust. Think about it. A well-run organization is way better at getting funding, managing it properly, fighting for its members' rights, running programs effectively. It just strengthens their ability to actually do the work, serve their community better, more reliably. For people living with HIV, it means having a stronger, more stable advocate on their side. Better access to help, less stigma, hopefully, better quality of life. It's that foundational stuff, often unseen, that lets them deliver. Builds trust, ensures accountability, improves health from the community up.
Wow, we've definitely covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Quite a spectrum. From, those innovative condoms, Trust and Lovers, Plus Way, and the really encouraging progress on cervical cancer, to that powerful community response at Resende Bus Rank, and then the essential organisational work at ZNMP Plus Bay. These stories, they seem different, but they really do create this complex picture, don't they? Progress, challenges still there, but also incredible resilience in Zimbabwe's health and social world. Shows a society really working on itself.
It really does. And maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Just consider how connected all these things are. Public health programs, the demand for social justice, strong community organizations. They're all sort of essential ingredients for a healthy society, wouldn't you say? None of it works in isolation. They all influence each other constantly. Individual actions, community pressure, system changes, they all feed into national well-being. Maybe think about your own community. What role could you play, or do you play, in boosting health, safety, and making sure organizations are strong and accountable? It's something we're all part of, really. Understanding these links is maybe the first step.